In this segment, we'll cover a very important gram-negative rod of the enteric tract named Escherichia coli, or better known as E. coli. We'll also cover two specific types of E. coli, enterohemorrhagic E. coli, or EHEC, and enterotoxigenic E. coli, also known as ETEC. This segment really has special importance to me, not only because E. coli is a high-yield subject, but more importantly because of where we decided to stage the scene. The scene is called E. coli's soda fountain, and takes place in an old-fashioned soda fountain, or a restaurant that serves milkshakes and ice cream soda. In high school, my favorite summer job was working at one of these soda fountains, and I had a lot of great memories from working there, so it was a big inspiration for the idea. So, I hope you enjoy it. First, we'll lay out the important microbiology and virulence factors for E. coli, then we're going to talk about the clinical effects, then dive into talking about EHEC, and finally ETEC. So, we have our E. coli waiter serving a milkshake, which has a meaning of its own, but I'll get back to that. A little trade secret I figured out from working in a soda fountain is that they put a secret ingredient in all milkshakes. It's milk. And coincidentally, one of the most important defining features for E. coli is its ability to ferment lactose. Lactose is in milk, and remember it's pink because lactose fermenters grow pink on McConkey's agar. We also use this same milk symbol for lactose fermentation in our Klebsiella, Enterobacter, and Serratia video. So when you hear lactose fermenter, you've narrowed it down to these bacteria. And E. coli is also encapsulated. So we'll draw this familiar glass capsule, and we'll have it surrounding a cake. The cake stands for K antigen, which is an important antigen present on the capsule used for serotyping. We'll talk more about this when we get to clinical presentations. When E. coli grows on eosin methylene blue agar, or EMB agar, it produces a metallic green sheen. These green coasters will remind us of that. E. coli is also catalase positive, so we'll just add our catalase positive cat curled up on this bar stool. The last important virulence factor for E. coli is its fimbriae, which we'll illustrate by drawing a long fimbriae-like bow in our hair. These fimbriae, or pili, are important because they're necessary for the bug to be able to cause a urinary tract infection. Since it causes UTIs, we'll just draw our UTI cup, but this time the cup is somewhat special because E. coli is actually the number one cause of UTIs. In fact, about 80% of UTIs are caused by E. coli, so we'll write a big number 1 on the UTI glass. Now we'll come back to this strawberry milkshake. We chose to make it specifically a strawberry milkshake because we wanted the color red to remind you of blood. This is because E. coli is also the leading cause of gram-negative sepsis. Although we didn't feel it was necessary to illustrate the virulence factor important for causing sepsis, I'll just mention it. It's lipopolysaccharide, or LPS endotoxin, and this is located in the outer cell membrane. We didn't illustrate it because LPS is a virulence factor for all gram-negatives, and not at all specific for E. coli. Remember this helmet from our Group B strep and listeria videos? That's right, it's our meningitis helmet. We also made this baby reaching out towards this cake. So this altogether symbolizes that E. coli causes meningitis in neonates, and that it can only do so when it's positive for this K capsular antigen that we talked about earlier. Now that we've covered those basic clinical features of E. coli, we'll move on to cover EHEC and ETEC. First is EHEC. EHEC is most commonly transmitted by eating undercooked meat. So we've drawn this hamburger because undercooked hamburgers are a very common culprit. From the name enterohemorrhagic, you can probably infer that EHEC causes bloody diarrhea, but we'll still illustrate this in the drawing by having this bloody looking ketchup spilling all over the tray. And for consistency, we'll also color this stool red because this red stool symbol is what we've been using for all of the bugs that cause bloody diarrhea. One way to tell if we've isolated EHEC is that EHEC is unique in that it's the only E. coli that doesn't ferment sorbitol. So we'll draw this bottle of soda, and as you can imagine, back in the olden days when soda fountains thrived, you can bet that they served soda with real cane sugar. So their soda was sorbitol-free. Sorbitol-free should serve as a good reminder that EHEC does not ferment sorbitol. Now you definitely have to know about the toxin in EHEC. I could tell you that it's a toxin that inhibits ribosomes at the 6DS position, but you already knew that. You may not think you do, but you do. You know it because it's virtually the same toxin as Shigella's Shiga toxin. In fact, it's called Shiga-like toxin. Remember the 6DS written here on the 60-second hourglass? This represents 6DS subunit of ribosomes. Instead of redrawing these symbols, we'll have you remember that EHEC's toxin is Shiga-like by giving this boy a She-Gorilla Happy Meal toy. I think that's a pretty cool way to reinforce this connection. And also, just like Shigella, EHEC can cause hemolytic uremic syndrome, especially in children under 10. We'll represent this in a very similar way we did in Shigella, and I'll explain it once more just because I think it's a fun way to remember the pathogenesis of HUS, and I don't think it'll hurt to repeat it here. We're going to represent HUS with this straw, these plates, and this popping balloon. The first step is Shiga-like toxin damaging endothelial cells of capillaries in the glomerulus, illustrated by the straw containing a glomerulus. The damaged endothelial lining becomes thrombogenic, causing platelets to adhere, which is illustrated by these used up, dirty, sticky plates. Finally, these clumps of platelets lyse red blood cells as they pass through the capillaries. This hemolysis is illustrated by the red balloon being popped by the straw. There's one final thing you have to remember for EHEC, and it's a particular serotype that's been known to cause massive outbreaks, so you've got to remember it. It's the O157H7 serotype. To help you recognize it and associate it with EHEC, we'll draw this sign up here saying E. coli burger for 157, which is probably even more expensive than a burger would have been back in the 50s. Inflation's a killer, I know, but I guess so is EHEC. So again, the $1.57 will just help you remember O157H7. And that'll do for EHEC, so now let's finish up with ETEC. Everything you're going to want to know about ETEC will take place outside of this window. First, ETEC is known as traveler's diarrhea, so we'll have ETEC be represented by a truck, because, well, trucks travel. We're also making it specifically a water delivery truck, because ETEC is transmitted via water sources. Now we're writing El Agua de San Gabriel, Mexico. And we made the water truck to be from a Mexican water company because the classic history for someone with ETEC is recent travel to Mexico, where they drank the water. You may have heard this disease referenced as Montezuma's Revenge. We didn't write this long-winded title for a water company for no reason. It's actually there to help you keep straight two of the toxins that ETEC produces. The first is a heat labile toxin, which increases cAMP. The second is a heat stable toxin, which increases cGMP. So all you need to remember is that labile increases cAMP, and stable increases cGMP. So we have a mnemonic that fits nicely within this title. El Agua de San Gabriel pairs the L and the A in El Agua with the S and the G in San Gabriel. So L for labile increases cAMP, and S for stable increases cGMP. And as a side note, this heat labile toxin that increases cAMP is very similar to cholera toxin, which you'll see in the cholera video. Finally, we'll draw a delivery truck driver standing on a stool and holding a jug of water. The stool with the water above it will help you think of watery diarrhea. ETEC is watery, not bloody like EHEC. And to make this extremely clear, we colored the stool brown as opposed to the red stool for EHEC. And that's all we have for E. coli. If you can, in your mind, compartmentalize the left, middle, and right, left being EHEC, middle being shared features, and right outside of the window being ETEC, you should really be able to answer almost any question about E. coli.